And you raised money.
Yeah.
You raised money, a bunch of money for. I know you support a bunch of foundations, so that was awesome too.
Yeah.
That was sort of the other driving force behind you doing it, besides just you're crazy, but also because you were raising money for a bunch of good causes.
Yeah, raising money. We raised $200,000. At the time I finished, I stopped keeping track, but it's probably like 215 now or something like that. For Semper Fi Fund, Tunnel to Towers Foundation, Coalition to Salute America's Heroes, and that was kind of how I almost physically manifested how successful it was. And so what I was trying to do is just create a story that people could feed off of. And so when you look at all the stories that are out there about veterans coming back, the vast, 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 vast majority of stories are the post-traumatic stress story. Every movie that comes out that is about a OAF veteran coming home is this pretty much the same recipe. Veteran goes overseas, they experience war, they see some bad stuff like you do in war, they come back and they're a basket case and they implode their family and all this stuff. And that's a hugely important story to know, because it does happen, and we have to take care of those guys, and we have to make sure we keep that story in the forefront of our minds. But what started to bother me was that was the only story that was getting told. And I think General Mattis said it best when he answered the question somewhere, and he said, expectations are very strong. So if you go overseas and everybody's kind of expecting you to basically have PTS, then there's a good chance that you're going to manifest that in yourself just by virtue of the fact that that's what's expected, and so you're just going to create that.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was get this story out there, tell a story where there was a guy that went overseas, had a traumatic experience, and came back and was better than he was before. And so that was how I determined I was going to create this story. And, I felt that I knew that this was a problem, that this story wasn't getting out there. And so I felt the responsibility to create it myself. If it's not out there, it's like what I was saying in that I can't journal. I had that responsibility because it just wasn't out there very much. And so I set out to create that story. And then, so if there was a guy that was struggling, he could see that story, and then he could see, it actually is possible to go see war and come back and be fine, or not necessarily be totally fine, but overcome it and find your new path and find your new mission and continue on and keep fighting for veterans, keep fighting for your brothers. And if there's a guy that's coming home and he's kind of on the fence, he sees that story and maybe takes him the right way, and then at the same time getting it out there for civilians. There's a major military-civilian gap of understanding, because military tends to be isolated and on the bases. And, I could see that gap because of all these movies that were coming out. There's 100% of movies that came out were the main character had PTSD. Whereas you look at the statistics, and it's 25% of non-combat troops have what we'll call PTSD. 7% of combat troops have PTSD. And so it's a huge misrepresentation of the actual scale. And so I wanted civilians to see that story where here's a veteran that came home and was, he was able to kind of adapt or process what he'd seen.